Well, everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and talk about the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 and see how this phone holds up in 2022. Now, I will definitely tell you this is not a phone I would recommend buying anymore, but it is quite a bit of a legendary device. I've seen a ton of people rock this phone when it first came out, and I was obsessed with watching reviews when this phone originally came out. And I'm going to be honest, I think this phone is still legendary. It's actually a groundbreaking phone when you come to think about it. And I will preface this whole video saying, please do not buy this phone. I would recommend buying phones like the Galaxy S10 if you want to go the lowest route from Samsung in terms of price and everything. If you can afford it, I'd recommend going the Galaxy S20 Ultras and those types of devices. So if you want to pick up those ones, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Samsung Galaxy Note 4, what is so crazy to me is that this phone, it doesn't look like the latest phone, as you guys can tell. But the display on this phone is still actually very, very good. On the front of this phone, we had a 5.7-inch 1440p Super AMOLED display. Now, this panel itself is actually a really good panel. This was a 1440p panel from 2014. That is so crazy to think about it, and it was a Super AMOLED display. Now, to give you some thought process of what else was in the market, around the same time, we had the iPhone 6 and we had the iPhone 6 Plus. I believe we had another Samsung Galaxy, I think it was the Galaxy S4 that came out this year, or the Galaxy S5, I believe. So this year had a couple other phones around it, but this one with that type of display, by far probably the best display from a phone in that specific year. On the top we had a little bit of bezel, on the bottom, I mean it's a lot of bezel compared to now, but for that time, the bezels around the screen were actually kind of thin, at least on the sides. So it made this phone look a little bit more premium than even the Note 3, which was pretty cool. You had the Samsung logo at the top, you had the, home button on the center bottom, and the capacitive keys on the sides as well. And it's so crazy to see how far we've came from even this specific situation. Now, I will say the display is probably its highlight or one of its highlights, but on the bottom, we have the micro USB port, which I'm glad they went to USB-C, in 20, whatever, when the Note 7 came out. But we also have the S Pen. And this is by far one of the coolest things about the entire Samsung Galaxy series. And what's so cool is that Samsung is still giving us the S Pen so many years later. It's been like so many years since Samsung initially made it, and they still actually implemented it back inside of the phone on the S22 Ultra. So I think that's a really cool thing. I love the Galaxy Note 4. I think it's a really cool phone. Is it the first one I would recommend people to buy? I don't know, probably not anymore, but it's cool to have a stylus built into your phone, and I'm a huge fan of that. But another cool thing, and why the Note 4 was so groundbreaking, was that this was actually the last Galaxy Note phone, and probably one of the last Galaxy phones in general, in my opinion, to have a plastic back with a removable battery and expandable storage. Now, from a flagship, I know their A series had a lot of removable backs and removable batteries and expandable storages, but from their flagship phone, this phone had pretty much it all. And I love that from Samsung. The fact that they gave us that, as almost like a, goodbye celebration until they went to the Note 5, I was actually in love with the Note 4. And in fact, I did buy another Galaxy Note 4 to custom ROM it, I think about a year and a half or 2 years ago. Unfortunately, it did not work out properly. I think I boot looped it or something like that. It's been like 2 or 3 years, to be honest. But I loved having the ability of just going through and just removing the battery if I had an issue. If I wanted to go ahead and, test something out, I could remove the battery. I can put in, expandable storage if I almost ran out. And that was something that was really cool. Phones nowadays don't have it, but I love the Samsung Galaxy Note 4 because of that. Now, we also have the camera setup on the back as well, which is actually pretty insane. It was a 16 megapixel sensor, 4K at 30 on the back, and a 3.7 megapixel front camera with 1440p on the front. So normally a lot of phones in this day and age were still filming in 1080p video on the back and usually only 720p on the front. You look at something like the iPhone 6 Plus, for example, that phone could only do 1080p on the back of that camera and only, I think, 720p on the front. Now, looking at them now, I will say I think the iPhone 6 series probably held up a little bit better, but that's still cool that we had that type of capability back in 2014. That was an emerging type of video resolution, and back in 2014, if you had 4K, that was amazing. That was like a flagship feature. Nowadays, if your phone doesn't have 4K, even on the front camera, that's almost like kind of like a weird thing. We looked at the Pixel 6a right now, that doesn't have 4K on the front, and it's kind of strange, to be honest. with this type of phone, you have quite a few features built into the camera. As always with a lot of Samsung Note phones, they've had a lot of features built in since like day one, and that's one thing I love about Samsung's. Even though One UI may not be as great in some areas as stock Android, you cannot, give Samsung any, flack for not putting in tons of features. I mean, they put so many features inside of that Galaxy Note phone, and I'm so happy about it. Now, I will say, if you're trying to use this specific phone for, using nowadays in terms of camera, it's not going to hold up that well. A Pixel, 3 is probably going to be giving you better quality than this thing. A Samsung Galaxy Note, 8 is going to be giving you much better quality than this thing, and so on and so forth. So I definitely do think when it comes down to this specific phone's camera quality, it probably isn't the best thing to do anymore. I think, going down the road of something like a Galaxy Note 10, something along those lines is definitely the better way to go. Galaxy S10 as well. But this camera at that time was actually pretty legendary in my opinion. So in terms of the camera quality, that kind of covers it up there as well. In terms of software and longevity, as all of us know, as I just stated, this phone is not going to be getting any more software updates anytime longer. So take it as you will, but I think that's totally expected. When you have a phone like this, it's not going to be supported forever. And this thing, I believe, stopped at Android Marshmallow, apparently. I could have sworn it stopped at Android Lollipop, but whether it was Lollipop or Android Marshmallow, it is severely outdated right now. And for this thing to be stopping at that point, we're on the betas of Android 13 right now. So this thing is not going to be supported anytime longer, but that's why this phone was so cool, because you could custom ROM it. And I was able to custom ROM a lot of Galaxy phones. I think it was around the Galaxy Note 5 where it was just got really hard to custom ROM it. But phones like the Note 4, Note 3, I think you can still custom ROM them. And I believe there's also still kind of a decent development community. There's probably some Android 11 ROMs. If you're lucky, there might be an Android 12 ROM you can test out. But again, it's not going to be giving you that crazy great of an experience. It's not going to be that stable, but for a test device on the side, it's still kind of cool to check out. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there as well. Now in terms of the actual performance of this phone, this device had that Qualcomm Snapdragon 805 chipset inside of it with 3 gigabytes of RAM. Nowadays, we're on a completely new generation of Snapdragon, which I like. I like how they're going down this 8 Gen 1, 8 Gen 1 Plus type of series. They've done it before, like they've had 2 iterations every year, but I like how they're going down this road. Back then in 2000, remember, this was the flagship of 2014. So when you think of the most expensive phone nowadays, like the Galaxy S22 Ultra, maybe the Z Folds, you can probably throw in there Pixel 6 Pros. This was that phone in 2014. And honestly, this phone, when you think about it like that, it's actually still kind of relevant. Like if you just threw Android 12 on this thing and you gave me the same type of performance that this phone had, it really wouldn't be that great, and I don't think it would probably shock anybody. But it's still very interesting to see how well this phone is performing. Nowadays, when you look at the Pixel 6a, there's a great example. That phone had 6 gigabytes of RAM, and that is a budget phone. When you compare that budget phone to this phone, about 8 years ago, as I mentioned before, you are definitely getting a much more newer device and a much better device overall on a newer budget phone than this thing. So it's cool to see technology improving that way. And in terms of performance, that covers it up too. In terms of battery life, this thing is a little complicated because it had a stock 3220 mAh battery, but like I mentioned, you have the capability of increasing longevity if you want to go ahead and replace that battery inside of it. So that is another big, massive thing you can take a look at as well. And honestly, when it comes down to it, I think this specific phone is a solid phone to pick up if you're wanting to go ahead and test it out on the side. But this is not a phone I would recommend buying by any means if you want to go ahead and pick up a phone and, use it on an everyday basis. If you want to buy this phone, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. But do not use this phone anymore. It is severely outdated, and it is just not in a good situation in terms of software, in terms of, really performance and battery and all that stuff. But it is a really cool phone when you actually think about it. The amount of impact this phone probably had back in 2014 and how good of a phone this was at that time is actually pretty legendary. So, but like I mentioned, please buy something like a Galaxy S10 or newer. That is definitely the better way to go. So, in terms of that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.